Welcome to The Telegraph. I'm Tim Stanley. With me now to discuss the impact of the no vote in Parliament is Ambassador John Bolton. He served as the United States' permanent representative at the United Nations during George W. Bush's presidency. Ambassador Bolton, could you tell me what you think the impact of Parliament's decision will be upon the US-UK special relationship?
I really don't think there will be much of an impact. I think this is much more of a devastating defeat for Prime Minister Cameron in domestic UK politics. But I myself don't favor the use of force in Syria here because of the use of chemical weapons, not for having reasons having to do with lack of UN authority or anything like that. I just don't think there's a palpable American interest at stake here. And my sense is that many within the Conservative Party in Britain in particular didn't see a concrete British interest as well. Ultimately, I think the actual impact of this decision will be pretty small.
But surely what's critical here is that this isn't a Prime Minister saying no to action, it's a Parliament saying no. And does that not mean that in the future, whenever presidents deal with Prime Ministers, they're going to be thinking at the back of their mind, can this man or this woman carry his Parliament with him?
Well, I think they will certainly ask the question. You can ask the whips of the coalition parties why they lost this. It's really fairly astonishing that they would, to me anyway, that they would go ahead with a vote on something this critical, where a British Prime Minister has not lost a vote like this since 1782, that they would allow it to happen. But I think for that very reason, it just is going to cause less of a problem in the future, that prime ministers will count their votes more carefully next time.
In your analysis, what went wrong?
Well, I think part of this is due to President Obama. I think this is another example of the United States leading from behind. I think if the president had been doing things other than granting interviews to obscure radio and TV stations to make his case, if he had been out front, if he had been making the case publicly, if he had already released the intelligence that the United States had, if he had done his work effectively with the Arab League, which in its statement a few days ago wouldn't endorse the use of force either. If the president had been doing his job, it would have been easier for Prime Minister Cameron to do his job. But it's another example, I think, of the weakness and inattention of the Obama administration that has cost us so much over the last 4.5 years.
And do you think that Britain has played a role in pushing Obama down this particular road? Because it does seem from the outside like Cameron was making the case for some kind of action for a very long time, for 1 to 2 years. Obama was really resisting that. Obama then swings behind it, and at that moment, support for it collapses in Britain. Do you think Britain has edged America towards where it is now?
I think it has in part, and I think this is a failure on the part of both Prime Minister Cameron and President Obama to figure out what they want. What is the strategic objective? I mean, in my view, Syria is a humanitarian tragedy, but it pales in significance compared to the threat of Iran's nuclear weapons program. And neither President Obama nor Prime Minister Cameron have spent very much time during their time in office worrying about that threat. I think now this weak response, after all this moral posturing about Syria, the absence of a British response and what, by all indications we have right now, will be a very weak military response by the United States, will simply say to the Ayatollahs in Tehran, there is nothing that stands between us and nuclear weapons. And
so you're not against any intervention, but to be clear about the Conservative perspective, you're just saying that Obama and Cameron have picked the wrong target.
I want to overthrow the government in Iran. That is the cause of the main problem throughout the Middle East. If Iran had not been supporting the Assad regime, I don't think it would be in power today. And I think by focusing on the conflict in Syria, you are focusing on a symptom of the real problem and not the problem itself. The problem itself lies in Tehran.
Finally, Ambassador, do you think that America will go alone, or at least without Britain, into some kind of intervention?
Yes, I think President Obama has looked so foolish after having drawn his famous red line on the use of chemical weapons, a red line he never should have drawn, that not to use force now would just subject him to humiliation. And yet he has been saying in these interviews that that the intervention will be a shot across the bow. That's what he described it a few days ago. Maybe somebody needs to tell President Obama that a shot across the bow doesn't hit anything, so that he needs to say he used military force to cover his red line statement. I don't think the use of force will have any real effect, and I think that will send the worst possible signal to Assad and to Tehran that they can engage in programs involving weapons of mass destruction, and maybe they won't face no cost, but they will face an insignificant cost, and that's a terrible lesson to teach.